Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today doing some Dinomist test hands. So I'm really excited for you guys because this deck was actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Zach. And this deck is a really fun pendulum deck to play with because you can summon out all sorts of really cool boss monsters from the extract, but also go in for an OTK. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name description every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month you're a patron. And definitely give Zach some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such an awesome deck. So let's get straight on into this. So this deck is a really awesome deck to be able to play with because this deck is actually really budget to be able to pick up because the majority of the Dinomist cards in this deck are either printed as commons or supers, which is really cool about this build. But you guys know that we got to pile shuffle up the deck because if you don't pile shuffle the deck, you run the risk of bricking. But this deck is super fun to be able to play with because with cards like number 4 and Gozen Match, you can actually lock down the field, making it super easy to go in for an OTK. And since we're only really playing water, you can actually lock down the opponent super easy in this deck and help you go in for an OTK with cards like limit removal that then during the main 2 you can just go in for other monsters so your dinosaurs don't get destroyed or your Dinomists don't get destroyed. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do for our first test hand because this deck is super fun to be able to play. So we're gonna go ahead and give the deck a quick cut and see what we can do for our first one. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Pot of Desires. That's not too bad to go ahead and draw into that card. 2 copies of Pot of Desires, a copy of Dinomist Howling, a copy of a low scale, and a copy of Torrential Tribute. So this is already alright for a test hand because we do have a Pot of Desires in our hand. Usually don't want to see both of them because we're only playing it 2 in this deck anyways. We're going to go ahead and resolve Pot of Desires to go ahead and get rid of the top 10 cards off of our deck, which isn't that big of a deal to get rid of the top 10 because we play all of the cards in this deck usually as 2 or 3 of, so we're just basically looking for a scale that we're trying to get into. Like with these cards that we just banished, we play multiples of everything. Unfortunately, we did banish all of our limiter removals, but that's totally fine since we're going first. So this point we're going to go ahead and draw 2, which we actually drew a Searcher, which is really good. So with this particular opening hand, we're going to do some really simple things going first. And what we're going to do is go ahead and activate our copy of Dinomist Charge. Dinomist Charge is a really good card because it has the ability that when it's activated, you get to add a Dinomist monster from your deck to your hand. So I'm just going to go ahead and add one that I want to summon later, like a copy of Dinomist Rex that I can get out on the field a little later in the game, which is going to help us out a lot in the long term with this deck. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck. And once we do, I'm going to go ahead and set 2 more cards on my side of the field, and I'm going to normal summon out a monster to the field and pass over to the opponent. I'm just going to go ahead and set this card, and the reason I'm not setting my scales is because of Dinomist Howling, which is a really powerful card that we're going to activate in just a second. So once our opponent goes to their turn, I'm just going to sit my hand right here because I'm going to set my scales in just a second. We're going to pass over to the opponent, and once they go ahead and go into their turn, we can activate the copy of Dinomist Howling. And this card is really good because when this card is activated, you can place 1 or 2 Dinomist Pendulum monsters from your deck in your Pendulum Zone, but you can't Pendulum summon monsters until the end of the next turn except Dinomist monsters, which is not that big of a deal because that's pretty much all we're Pendulum summoning anyways, which is really cool. But at this point, we can go ahead and set our scales with 1 trap card, which is why I didn't throw my scales in my back row with the 2 monsters that I had in my hand. So at this point, we're just going to go ahead and throw our scales with 2 monsters that we have in the deck. We're just going to go ahead and put those 2 monsters on our side of the field. And we also have a set Torrential Tribute for when our opponent makes a board. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and flip up the copy of Torrential Tribute. And Torrential Tribute is going to destroy our monster that we have set face down, which because of our Dinomist Charge will actually go back to our hand instead of to the extract. Because of the effect of Dinomist Charge, it has a really neat effect that when it's activated, you can add a Dinomist monster from your deck to your hand. And once return of a Dinomist card is added from your field to the extract, you can add one of those cards back to your hand instead, which is really cool. So it actually goes to the extract and then immediately goes back to our hand, which is a really good effect. So now that we've essentially stopped the opponent, we're going to go ahead and go into our next turn, which we're going to go ahead and draw into another copy of Torrential Tribute. So I'm going to go ahead and activate the copy of Pot of Desires just to dig into the deck to get some more plays. We're going to go ahead and banish the top 10 off of our deck. So we're going to go 5 right there, and then we're going to go 5 more right there, hopefully hitting a copy of our instant or ready fusion, which we actually don't hit either one. I don't believe we've actually banished all of them. That's not that big of a deal that we've actually hit 2 of them, but now we can actually pendulum summon for 4, which is going to be absolutely crazy. So at this point, you can go ahead and Pendulum Summon for 4, summoning out all of your Dinomist monsters to your side of the field that you have in your hand, setting one card face down, which is another copy of Torrential Tribute, and then you can just attack your opponent with all of these different monsters that you have on the field, which is a really, really good effect just to go in with all these different monsters to go in for a bunch of damage to the opponent, because you have 2500, 2400, 1800, and 1700 right here, and also you have the effect of your that has the ability that if this card battles, after it battles, you contribute one of their Dinomist monster to activate one of these effects, that this card can make a second attack on an opponent's monster in a row, and if it does, and attacks a defense vision monster, it inflicts piercing damage to your opponent. So this card can actually attack twice. So if your opponent does have 2 monsters on the field, you can just attack first with this, or 3 monsters. You can go and attack with one of your other Dinomist monsters, then attack with this card, and then use its ability to tribute the Dinomist monster that you were just used. And since this card was added back to the extract, it'll actually go back to your hand, so you can normal summon it during main 2, which is pretty good. So during main 2, we're going to go ahead and normal summon back out our monster to our field, because we pendulum summoned all of these to the field. You can actually make some really good plays, because we're actually going to overlay both of these on our side of the field to make a copy of Bahamut Shark, detach a material from it, and then special summon out a copy of Totally Awesome. Now that's going to give us 1 negate on our side of the field. Then we can overlay both of these Dinomists down here to make a copy of Nova, and then finally Infinity, giving us more negates on the field that then we can just pass over to the opponent and let them go. Because now we have a copy of Toad to give us a negate, and we have the copy of Infinity to give us a negate, which is going to be pretty good. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and pass over the opponent. If they can't deal with our field, we're going to go ahead and draw to another copy of Howling, and then swing with what we have to go in for game if we didn't already OTK, which is pretty good. Now what's really cool about this deck is when you activate both of those copies of Desires and you summon out one of our really cool boss monsters out of the extract, which is actually the Sword Soul Synchro monster. And there's a quick way that you can actually do that with 2 monsters on the field, which is really cool. If you can get a level 5 on your side of the field and a copy of Instant or Ready Fusion, you can bring out your copy of your Sea monster to actually go in for a synchro play, which is really cool. For example, if you have a copy of Dinomist Rex, your copy of Spino, or any of the other ones that you have on the field or in the deck, you can go ahead and activate a copy of Ready Fusion. I'm going to show you guys this quick little combo in the deck. You can go ahead and activate your copy of Ready Fusion while this card is on your side of the field to special summon out your copy of your Sea monster, and then synchro summon these 2 monsters together, which will go into the extract and into the graveyard, to then let us synchro summon out our copy of our Sword Soul Supreme Sovereign, which is a really cool boss monster that for every banished card, it goes up by 100 attack points, and for every banished card, your opponent's monsters go down by 100 attack points, which is pretty good. So let's go in for another test hand and see what we can do for the next one, because as you guys can see, this deck is really consistent at just throwing the pendulum scales with cards like Dinomist Howling, but you can draw into your pendulum scales as well if you don't draw into your copy of Howling. But it's really fun to be able to lock down the opponent with cards like Goes in Match as well, go into your copy of your Stealth Kraken, which is just a really cool card. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck again and see what we can do. And with cards like Torrential Tribute, if you do go first in this deck, you can go in for some really crazy plays. So let's go ahead and give the deck a quick cut and see what we can do for the next one. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Dinomist Rex, another copy of Pot of Desires, a copy of our level 4 Goes in Match, that's really good, and another copy of Desires. Unfortunately, drew in a double Desires twice, which is a little bit bad, but it's okay. So we're going to go ahead and use the copy of Desires to banish the top 10 off of our deck. It's really easy to count them in 5s to make it a little easier for you guys when you count these cards to be able to banish for Desires. And then we're going to go ahead and draw 2 into a copy of Instant and Ready Fusion. So it's actually a pretty good draw off of our Desires, which is why I actually bumped the Desires into this deck so that we could actually go in for those plays. I actually only play this card at 2, so it's really odd to see it like that, to draw it twice in a hand. I haven't even had that happen in play testing. So we're going to go ahead and set our copy of Goes in Match face down, and set our copy of Limit Removal face down, not in the pendulum scale. Don't ever set it in the pendulum scale, that's bad. And we're going to go ahead and activate our copy of our Ready Fusion. Now what's really cool is you can special summon out a normal monster to your side of the field at the cost of 1,000 life points. So we're actually going to summon out a copy of Rare Fish to our side of the field, and then just normal summon out to the field our level 4 Dinomist monster, to then overlay both of these on the field to make our copy of our number 4. Number 4 is extremely important to make on our side of the field when we have Goes in Match, because you can actually lock down the opponent. So at this point, we just have 2 monsters in our hand, or a monster and a copy of Desires, which I'll use the copy of Desires later if I get another copy of Ready or Instant Fusion, if we didn't banish the other copies of it, which we didn't actually banish any of our copies of our Instant Ready Fusion. But funny thing, we actually banished all 3 copies of this and all 3 copies of this. That's kind of odd, but still, it's kind of cool because we still have plenty of other scales that we can go in for. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and pass over to the opponent. Once they go ahead for their turn, you can go ahead and flip your copy of Goes in Match against the opponent, and this is actually a pretty good field, because if you guys are unfamiliar with what number 4 does, this card essentially works like your copy of Zombie World with your copy of your Rivalry of Warlords, which is really kind of a cool play to be able to use in this particular deck, because with Goes in Match, all we're really summoning is water anyways. So this card actually turns everything into water, and this is each player can only control 1 type of monster, or 1 attribute of monster, so that basically makes it so that your opponent can only summon 1 monster unless they're already playing water, which is really cool. And this card can also quick effect pop an opponent's monster to be able to do damage equal to half that monster's attack points, which is a pretty good effect. So it's really easy to be able to stealth Krajan lock your opponent in this deck. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and go into our next turn, because we probably pop their 1 normal summon, and we're going to draw into another copy of a monster, which is going to actually be a low scale, but we do have that copy of Pot of Desires that we can resolve, which is going to be pretty good, because hopefully we can actually get a monster off of this so we can pendulum summon out to the field to help us go in for an OTK. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and banish 10 more off the top of the deck, which is 5 there and 5 here, to be able to have 20 total banished cards, and then draw 2, which is going to be perfectly what we need. So this is actually a really cool combo that I'm going to show you guys. So what we're going to do is activate our low scale and activate our high scale, which all of your Dinomist monsters are either 3 or 6 scale monsters. Activate our copy of our Ready Fusion to be able to summon out to our side of the field our copy of our Sea Monster, which is a tuner monster, which is going to help us out a lot. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pendulum summon out my copy of Spinos, and then synchro summon, because it's a tuner and a non-tuner, and go in for a really awesome boss monster, our copy of our Sword Soul Supreme Sovereign, because this is actually a water monster, which is really cool. And since we have 20 total banished cards, he's going up by 2,000 attack points, and he's dropping our opponent's monsters down by 2,000 attack points, making it so he's sitting at a total of 5,000 attack points. That is absolutely insane. And that's if our opponent has not resolved anything like copies of Pot of Prosperities, Extravagance, their own Desires, or anything like that. And we're also using our copy of our Goes in Match with our copy of Krajan to ensure that our opponent's probably only got 1 monster on the field that our copy of Krajan can quick effect pop on the field, which is pretty good. And if you do want to pendulum summon out your copy of Spino later, you can use Limiter Removal to boost it up, which is a pretty good effect if you want to boost up your monsters. So at this point, we're probably just going to attack in for game, because this is going to pop whatever monster they have on the field, go in for 19, and this is going to go in for 5k to be able to do a lot of damage. And don't forget, this card does do burn damage as well, which is pretty good. So let's go ahead and draw and just see what we draw into, which is going to be another level 5, which at this point we can just pendulum summon out. These 2 are to our side of the field, and just basically go in for game during the next turn, which we don't really want to summon anything else from the X deck, because we've pretty much summoned what we need under Goes in Match to just OTK. But you can resolve your copy of Limb Removal to boost this up to 5k and this up to 4k to then be able to go in for an OTK if you did an OTK on the last turn. So let's go ahead and go into the next one and see what we can do for the next test hand. If you guys would like to check out the deck profile, as always, it is down in the description down below. And we're going to move these Desires way away from one another, because we've drawn them twice in a row, back to back. I'm going to put these right here. I'm going to pick up the rest of the deck and put these down here. And hopefully we actually don't draw into a double Desires again. But it did work out, because we did summon out our copy of our Supreme Sovereign that came out at 5k attack points, which is a really good example of how you can make use of banishing those 10 cards from the top of your deck. Now, you can play Baron de Fleur over the copy of the Supreme Sovereign, but it doesn't get quite as big. You've already got cards to pop, and I really don't like it in this deck, to be honest, because with that card in the deck under Goes in Match, you can't summon it, which is why I actually like the Supreme Sovereign over Baron de Fleur, oddly enough, in this particular deck. So let's go ahead and give the deck a quick little shuffle and see what we can do for our next one. So for the next one, we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of our Dinomist Charge, which is already a search for the deck, a copy of our Brachion, Brachyon, a copy of Spinos, which is already a high and a low scale, a copy of Ready Fusion, excuse me, and a copy of our Dinomist level 4. This is already pretty good right off the bat. This is actually a pretty good opening hand. So we're going to go ahead and activate the copy of our Dinomist Charge. Dinomist Charge is going to grab us another monster from our deck to our hand. And at this point, you kind of got to pick which way you want to go. If you want to go with a high scale or a low scale or a level 4 or a level 5 that you want to summon to your side of the field. Because we do have these monsters in our hand, we are going to have to leave one of them in the scale. So I'm going to go ahead and put my level 4 or my level 5, excuse me, monsters in the scale. And then I'm going to go ahead and Pendulum Summon for 2 on my side of the field, which is going to help us a lot to make a copy of Bahamut Toad, which is going to give us an additional negate on the field. Now you can reverse this if you don't want to go this particular route. You can actually flip it and put these on the field instead and put a copy of Infinity on the field, which is a little bit better of an option if you want to go for your copy of Infinity, but it kind of depends if you already have a copy of your Gozen Match on the field. Because if you got Gozen Match, you don't want to go for Infinity, you want to go for Bahamut Toad because they're water. But if you do have the copy, or if you don't have the copy of Gozen, it is a little bit better to go for the Infinity because it can gobble up stuff and it's a walking gate, which is really good. Now you can save the copy of Ready Fusion for later when we do get another level 5 to go in for another play in the deck, or another level 4 for that matter to go into a copy of Bahamut Toad during the next turn. So at this point we can just pass over to the opponent, establishing a negate on our side of the field, and then draw into the next turn into a copy of Torrential Tribute, which isn't exactly what you want to see, but it's totally fine because at this point we can just ride the Infinity and go in for our plays later on. So let's give the deck a quick shuffle because I actually bumped one of the cards off the top. Give the deck a quick little shuffle and see what we actually draw for the following turn. We're actually going to draw a level 5, which is pretty good to be able to just summon to our side of the field, activate that copy of Ready Fusion once we Pendulum Summon it out to our side of the field, summon out to our side of the field the copy of the Sea Monster, and then immediately Synchro Summon into a copy of the Sea Monster with the copy of the Supreme Sovereign, which is pretty good just to immediately get on our side of the field to go in for more plays. You also have the copy of Torrential, which works with this card, which is really cool because this card has the ability, if this card would be destroyed by card effect, you manage any card from your graveyard instead, and if a card is banished, then you can manage one card from both your opponent's field and graveyard, which is pretty good. So if Torrential Tribute didn't take care of their monster, you do have the effect that you can just immediately banish a copy of, say, Ready Fusion that you don't need from the grave to prevent this card from being destroyed by Torrential, and then you also will destroy the copy of Infinity, which at this point doesn't super matter because we can go in for game later on, or if the opponent dealt with the copy of Infinity, you can go in for more plays. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for one more test hand with this particular deck. Because as you guys can see, really consistent at getting the scales and getting the Pendulum Summon out to the field, which is really cool about this deck. And being able to use Pot of Desires to actually boost up the Supreme Sovereign is just ridiculous in this deck. It's really fun. This deck is super fun to be able to play and can just go in for so many cool plays to be able to OTK the opponent and just control the board with cards like Gozen and Torrential Tribute, which is really cool to combo with your copy of your Supreme Sovereign. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck again and see what we can do. So we're going to shuffle up the deck and then let's see what we get. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Dinomist Rex, a copy of our Pelos, a copy of Spinos, a copy of our Brachyon, and a copy of Limiter Removal. So this is actually going to be an OTK hand, which is really cool because we're actually going to get 2 of our monsters out on our side of the field, which is going to help us out a lot. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and throw the copy of Spinos. Actually, you can keep the Spinos in the hand and actually go in for 5k damage, which is going to be really neat. So at this point, let's go ahead and throw our copy of our Pelos and our copy of, say, actually, you have to throw the Spinos because the Spinos is actually the only low scale that we have in our hand. So at this point, we can go ahead and Pendulum Summon for 2 on our side of the field and set the copy of Limiter Removal, passing over to the opponent, leaving these on the field because we can just Pendulum Summon out the ones that get destroyed. So at this point, if our opponent doesn't touch these monsters, we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Dinomist Charge, which then we can activate to get us an additional search during the following turn to get us another high attack point monster like another copy of Spinos that we can then Pendulum Summon to the field. So if we Pendulum Summon this out to the field, you actually have a really neat effect that you contribute one other Dinomist monster to activate one of these effects so that you can actually attack the opponent directly. So we can actually just tribute the copy of Brachyon and then it can activate its effect to be able to just go in for 5k because then it can attack directly, activate the copy of Limiter Removal, go in for 5k directly, and then during main 2, we're going to make an XZ play to go into our copy of Infinity, which is pretty good to just immediately go in for a copy of Infinity because you can make your copy of Infinity on top of no Nova, which is kind of neat. So you can just go in for game with that particular play, which is really cool. During main 2, making the copy of Infinity is ridiculous. So at this point, we're going to pass over to the opponent, let them do whatever they want to do. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and draw into another turn, which is drawing into a copy of Ready Fusion, which is going to help us out a lot. Because at this point, we can pendulum summon this back out to the field, activate our copy of Ready Fusion. And once we do, we can go in for the same play, summoning out our copy of Sea Monster and synchro summoning for a copy of our Supreme Sovereign, which is pretty cool to just get that monster back on our side of the field as a really big beater. Now at this point, we can go ahead and attack with this and attack with our copy of our Supreme Sovereign. And if you see the need for it, you can make a copy of Zeus on top of the copy of Infinity if you need to make it at that point. But I think that pretty much shows how the deck works. It's really fun to be able to play. It's a really, really awesome OTK deck. They can also control the board if you do go first with cards like Gozen Match and Torrential Tribute. And with cards like Dinomist Charge activating when you use your copy of Torrential, it can just go in for some really, really cool plays. I really like this deck. It's really fun. And if you guys would like to check out the deck profile, as always, it is down in the description down below. And even at the end, those copies of Desires are kind of holding on to one another, which is really kind of interesting that they're that close. It's really weird because we did shuffle up the deck. So that's it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. This deck is really fun to be able to play. If you guys have never played with Dinomist, it's a really cheap pickup if you guys would like to pick up a Dinomist deck because everything's been printed as commons are super for the core. You can change out cards like Ready Fusion and Instant Fusion for other cards in deck, but they're really good tech cards in this particular build. But I think that's going to do it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of Notification Squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.